Have lots to talk to you about. Obviously, the latest developments in Gaza. The hearings today at the International Court of Justice, South Africa accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. But let's start with this Houthi campaign. And obviously, it's happened as a result of the Israel-Hamas conflict. I wonder if that underlines the fact that perhaps this conflict needs to be brought to a close.
If you want to know what the Houthi terror pirate regime is about, you need only look at its slogan, which very helpfully was right by your right ear until a second ago. It says, Allahu Akbar, death to America, death to Israel, cursed be the Jews, victory to Islam. The Houthi terror pirates have all the self-awareness of cartoon villains, but they are no laughing matter. They're a dangerous business.
They are a dangerous business, but you don't want to see this escalate across the wider region?
No, of course not. We very much hope that this conflict can be contained and that the massacre that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th, that chapter can end with the destruction of the Hamas regime and return of the hostages. But I think that the escalation tonight reminds us of the importance of the UK-Israel alliance, because we find ourselves both fighting different proxies of the same Iranian regime. In Gaza, we're fighting against the Hamas rapist regime, which perpetrated the brutal massacre of 1,200 people on October 7 and took 250 people hostage. And now we find the UK and the US fighting the Houthi pirate regime, which is also aligned in a proxy of Iran. And that reminds us that in the grand scheme of things, in the big fight for international peace and security, the UK and Israel are on the same side.
It's just over 3 months now since Hamas went into southern Israel and killed and raped and took many people hostage. How would you describe the collective trauma of Jewish people, not just in Israel, but around the world, 3 months on?
Israeli society and the Jewish people around the world are deeply traumatized, not only by the atrocities of October 7th, but the fact that after they happened, they set off a wave of jubilation and celebration around the world. The protests against Israel began on October 8th, before Israel began its offensive against Hamas and immediately after the massacre. And we have honestly been saddened, shocked and appalled to see people at first celebrating Hamas's atrocities and then covering them up, and then denying them, and then trying to cast them onto Israel, and the campaign around the world to tear down the posters of the vulnerable hostages, little children abducted and held as captives in the Hamas terror dungeons, has triggered some very painful memories and reminded us of the depth of the problem of dehumanization of Jews that remains in large parts of the Western world.
In terms of the hostages that are still in Gaza, and you still trying to get them out, at the moment it would appear negotiations have broken down, but is it true that Israel have linked that to allowing people in the south of Gaza to return to the north?
The hostage issue, with 136 hostages still trapped in the Hamas terror dungeons, is intensely painful for Israeli society. That's why many Israelis walk around with this dog tag that says in Hebrew, "Our hearts are captive in Gaza and bring them home now." 136 people. It's already too late for 25 of them who have been killed in captivity, and we are committed to the pledge to bring them all back.
Have you linked it with Palestinians returning to the north of Gaza?
I can't comment on specific details of the negotiations. These are sensitive negotiations where human lives hang in the balance, but we are, of course, making every effort to get those vulnerable hostages home, knowing what physical, psychological and sexual abuse they are suffering in those terror dungeons.
In terms of eliminating Hamas, which is the stated aim of Israel, you've killed a deputy leader in Lebanon. You say you've killed 8,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza, and we know many thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed or maimed.
Tragically.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said just yesterday the daily toll on civilians on Gaza, particularly on children, is far too high. Have too many people been killed?
Yes. Far too many people have been killed. Far too many people have been killed since the moment Hamas invaded us on October 7th and perpetrated that act of genocide when they burned whole families alive, dismembered little children, raped little girls and abducted our grandmas. It's a very sad fact that everyone who has been killed or hurt since October 7th would still be alive if Hamas had not invaded us, launched this war and chosen to fight this war from inside densely populated areas where it has deliberately and in flagrant violation of international law hidden its military assets underground under civilian areas. And it remains true that this war could end tomorrow and the suffering could end right now if Hamas surrenders. And that's the position of the UK government when we see Lord Cameron in that op-ed with the German foreign minister writing, Hamas must lay down its arms. There is no room for Hamas in a post-war Gaza. We heard Secretary Blinken saying the same thing. This war can end tomorrow if Hamas surrenders, and we desperately hope, we're calling on Hamas fighters, they know they have two options, to surrender peacefully or to die in battle, and we hope they will make the right choice.
This war could end tomorrow if you stopped bombing them.
Well, we are not going to abandon 136 hostages in the hands of the Hamas rapist regime, and anyone who thinks we are going to do so is sorely mistaken and their moral compass irreparably broken.
I understand that. But you are the stronger nation. You are the bigger nation. It's in your hands to stop this, to break this cycle.
We very much want to end this cycle, and we want to end this war, and we want to end this war in a way that makes sure that Hamas can never attack us again. Because the first thing that Hamas did after brutally slaughtering 1,200 people on October 7 and taking 250 people hostage was to tell us that it wants to do it again and again. They went on TV and they said 1 October 7 was not enough. We will teach them a lesson and do this again and again until Israel is destroyed. So we want to end this war in a way that makes sure that they cannot attack us again like they did on October 7th, and they cannot attack us again like they did with 20 years of sustained rocket fire from the Gaza Strip.
And you'll know that some experts think that is unrealistic. Let me move...
We have a different assessment.
Let me move to the International Court of Justice, which held its first hearing today of a case presented by South Africa in which Israel is accused of committing a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. I'm going to play you a small clip from one of the submissions from one of the lawyers today. Have a watch of this.
Each day, yet more desperate people will be forced to relocate from where they are sheltering or will be bombed in places where they have been told to evacuate to. Entire multi-generational families will be obliterated, and yet more Palestinian children will become WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family, the terrible new acronym born out of Israel's genocidal assault on the Palestinian population in Gaza.
All of that is true, isn't it?
I think it is tragic and appalling that South Africa has decided to play advocate for the devil and serve as the legal arm of Hamas.
I'm going to pause you there, if I may, Mr. Levy, because almost every point I put to you or every question I ask you, you respond with an answer that is not relevant to the question.
Well, let me answer directly then. The lawyer there who is serving as the legal representative of Hamas, accusing Israel of genocide, is presenting a topsy-turvy reality in which Hamas does not exist, it hasn't taken hostages, Israel decided one bright morning to start bombing Gaza. On October 7th, we suffered an act of genocide. We suffered an act of genocide when Hamas invaded our country and burned, beheaded, tortured, mutilated, raped and abducted as many people as it could, as brutally as it could. And in response, we have launched a defensive campaign with very clear objectives: to destroy the Hamas regime so that it cannot hurt our people again, and to bring back the hostages who are still trapped in the terror dungeons. Those goals are very clear, and we have been pursuing them in full accordance with international law.
And that is disputed. I want to ask you about these comments made by Israeli politicians since October the 7th, and hopefully we can bring up the quotes. Here we are. This is your president. It's an entire nation out there that's responsible. He's referring to Gazans. Have a look at this. The next one. We are now actually rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Nakba, as people know, is a term for catastrophe after the 1948 war, a war used by Palestinians about ethnic cleansing. And we all have one common goal: erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Can you see why some people believe that you absolutely don't want Palestinians any longer in Gaza?
We think we have been very clear, both in word and in deed.
In those words?
Well, Mr. Vatouri does not make decisions on security matters in Israel. We think we've been very clear, both in word and in deed, that the people of Gaza are not our enemy. Our enemy is the Hamas regime, and that is why we have gone further than any army in the history of the world to try to get civilians out of harm's way. Now, we just had the former...
I'm going to bring you back to the words of those politicians, if I may. We're now actually rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Nakba, the Palestinian term for ethnic cleansing. Those are the words of a government minister
Well,
in your government?
Talk about a little bit of historical context. What the Palestinians refer to as the Nakba.
I'm just asking you about those words.
No, so I want to talk about that word Nakba. When the Palestinians use the word Nakba, they are referring to the consequences of the decision in 1948 to try to scuttle the creation of a Jewish state under the UN General Assembly resolution. They declared war in 1948. That war of annihilation did not go their way, and there were consequences as a result.
And how is that relevant to what your government minister has said now? Because what he is saying is we want to get rid of these people.
No, we do not want to get rid of these people. We have been very clear in word and in deed as a government, and as the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister have said, that we urge civilians to get to safety in the safe zone. We've been urging them to go to the safe zone.
There are no safe zones, you know that.
There is no. The Al-Mawasi zone has been rendered unsafe because Hamas has decided to shoot rockets out of it. Hamas decided to shoot rockets out of it, and the United Nations has said absolutely nothing about rockets being fired.
People near the Rafah crossing.
And it is absolutely tragic that Hamas continues to double down on its human shield strategy. I don't know whether your viewers, understand the extent to which in the last 16 years Hamas redesigned Gaza's cityscape in order to hide its military assets underneath civilian areas. And we have made extensive warnings for civilians to leave. We've placed 70,000 individual phone calls, dropped 7 million leaflets, 14 million phone calls, 14 million text messages. We have been going more than any army in history, and I'm quite happy to be fact-checked, more warnings than all armies in the history of counter-terrorism warfare put together to urge civilians to get out of harm's way. They are not our enemy. Our enemy is the rapist regime that perpetrated
There is no such thing out of harm's way in Gaza. I'm going to pause you there because we're out of time.
We would like the creation of safe areas, and we would like the UN to cooperate with us instead of condemning Israel for designating safe zones, which is what they have spuriously been doing.
There's no such thing as a safe area in Gaza. We're going to leave it there.
We hope there very much will be the day after Hamas.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. One of the most bewildering things about the post office scandal, and there